Welcome to In a Nutshell, the podcast dedicated to all things agricultural consulting. I'm Dylan Brush here with soil genius and ag consultant Bill Brush, and we're delighted to accompany you on this journey where we break down the different aspects of agricultural consulting. In each episode, we'll dive into the realm of agriculture through the eyes of Bill Brush, where consultants like Bill play a vital role in empowering farmers, agribusiness, and agricultural organizations. If you're passionate about agriculture, problem solving, and enjoy a little bit of detective work, this podcast is tailor-made for you.
Hi, this is Bill Brush, and welcome back to In a Nutshell. Today I'm in our series of travelogues. I'm going to talk about a trip that I took related to my consulting and also just travel to South Africa, one of the farthest places I've been, particularly from California. And it started off, and that's the way this tale will start, is an unbelievable trip to get there, just to get there. You know, we started off, we had a couple of friends, my wife and I, and they picked us up in a van. We had all of our suitcases and luggage loaded up to go up to San Francisco. And, it's an hour and a half, 2 hour drive there. And we were there, of course, early. We were pretty excited. So we were 2.5, 3 hours early. And we took off from San Francisco and did a red eye all the way to Washington, D.C. and into Reagan International Airport. And that took us about another 5 hours. Oh, and we had a layover there of 5 to 6 hours. And then we got on our South African Airlines flight from Washington to Dakar, which is the capital of Senegal, which is right up on the top of the big bulb of Africa there. And we needed to refuel. And that's about a 10-hour flight. And we got back in we stayed in the aircraft. They cooled it down. It was really nice. Good to get up and walk around after that long. And then our next flight was from Dakar to Johannesburg, which I thought we're almost there. Wrong. We were on a 15-hour flight from Dakar and to Johannesburg, South Africa. It's a big continent, and I found out. And you can't fly in a straight line because of some of the borders. Might catch some friendly or some unfriendly fire at our aircraft, so we had to fly around some countries. So we got into Johannesburg, and that would be great. We're now in South Africa, except we had a connecting flight to go on to Cape Town, which was another 3-hour flight to go from Johannesburg to Cape Town. All in all, somewhere in the neighborhood of 46 to 48 hours with absolutely no sleep. We were beat. And we went immediately to bed when we got into our hotel. At that point, we got up in the morning and felt like we'd been through some real tough conditions to get there after those 2 full days of travel. But we got up and I said, well, we made it. I said, there's only one bad thing about this, is that in about 2.5 to 3 weeks, we got to do it all over again, going backwards. So, but for some reason, the flight back wasn't quite so bad. But we were in Cape Town, which is absolutely probably the prettiest city of the ones we saw in South Africa. It's very beautiful, very modern. Down by the wharf, it had really been worked over. A lot of great sights around there. You sit in a shadow of what's called Table Mountain, which is a kind of a real steep up and then flattens out on top. They have a tram that runs up there, just really a great backdrop for a really great city. And from where we were, you could see out into the ocean and see what they call Robben Island, which is where a lot of the political prisoners were kept during the apartheid part of South Africa's existence. And that's where they kept Nelson Mandela, was at that place. And it's since been closed down and made into a museum. We had a nice gal that came up and took us around in her car, and she was our guide for looking around in that Cape Town area. And she took us to a lot of great sites, the vineyards of Stellenbosch and I was in a couple others that we went to, but many vineyards, and had an opportunity to taste a lot of their wines, which the ones we had were very, very good. We got a beautiful tour of winery owners. His wife gave us a tour of their house, which is about 300 years old, with a completely thatched roof in the style of kind of the Dutch. And we went inside. She was very, very gracious in allowing us to walk through her house and showing very, very few, except for things like electricity and newer style appliances. It was really kind of like it was when they built it 300 years ago. Really neat to go into that particular house. Another interesting fact that I really didn't understand till I got there, if you go down to the Cape of Good Hope, you get to where the Indian Ocean and the Atlantic Ocean come together. And you would think water and water, they just somewhere down there, it's where they come together. No, there was literally a dividing line that you could see. It wasn't a straight line. It was a line that moved back and forth. And somebody told me it wasn't so much the currents or anything, it's more the temperature of the water as they exchange right there. And between the temperature and the pattern of the different currents, it created a line where you knew right where that distinction was between the two. Really, like I say, a great opening week down in Cape Town. We went from there, we got back on a plane from this very beautiful, mild, temperate climate back to Johannesburg. And when we got there, it was in the grips of a very, very cold, for them, very cold part of their winter. And we were in a hotel, and we stayed out there just overnight. It was so cold in there. My wife and I were in our clothes with as many covers and blankets as we put on, with a little teeny heater that was right on the wall. It was like a hot plate that just emanated a little bit of warm temperature coming off of it. And when we got up in the morning, it was frigid in our room. So we got up out of there, and from there we went to the airport and we began to start our tour. And one of the things about the tour is they tried, it was, obviously a farm group, so we got to see a lot of the farming in that area. And one of the more unique things that we saw on that was the farming of macadamia nuts, which we went from the ocean to this real kind of I would call it a plateau where Johannesburg is. It got real cold, up a little higher into really, really tropical temperatures. It was really kind of all in just, a day. We were almost from one to the next. And macadamia nuts are grown in Hawaii, obviously a tropical climate, but over there they grow a lot of them. It's one of their major crops in this one tropical area. Their brand was Golden Macadamia Nuts, and we talked to the owner, and they ran a cooperative where all of the local macadamia nut farmers brought all the nuts to a central spot where they were able to use the same equipment to crack them and do everything and get them ready for sale. So very interesting. Probably the most interesting things when we were out in the actual macadamia nut fields were that they had some grazing going on there, but not like the grazing we might see here with maybe some sheep or goats or something like that. They had ostriches grazing in these macadamia nut fields. Quite a striking difference, and it just really was interesting. And to me, I said, well, we're not in the U.S. anymore, because I've never seen that in my life. So very, very good. This is really kind of early, too, in my consulting career, so I was exposed to a lot of things. Never saw this again to the many countries I went after this. And this was probably 20 plus years ago, at least, to when we went to South Africa. We also went down there and they had some unique cave formations, a lot of normal crops where there was some dairies in the area, where we had berry crops, dairy. They had really a pretty diverse cropping system, also sugarcane, bananas. So they had many, many different, and I met a consultant that had worked a lot with Neil Kinsey as I had, and he talked a lot because I had heard his name a lot, but it was really nice to see the guy in person and be able to talk to him one-on-one. That was another one of my highlights, to see a colleague down there and get the challenges that he was going through. So another unique thing when we got down in this part is that the menu. You know, there's a lot of things when I went to South Africa I've never experienced before or since. And one of the things is looking on the menu and seeing impala steak for a choice for your meal. Now, friends that we were with, he was a really a meat eater, loved his steak, so he ordered the impala steak. Took about 3 bites and says, "Here, try some." It was so tough and chewy that he ordered another steak, a regular New York steak, and had that instead. But it was interesting and kind of funny that he had to try impala meat, and we all had the same idea. That was probably our first and last opportunity to sample impala meat. As we went around and visited some of the other farms, and like I say, the sugarcane and banana plantations, dairies, we visited them all, but we were winding our way back to the capital, Pretoria. But one of the major things we decided to go to, or the people on the tour taking us decided to take us, was to Kruger National Park. Now, we know in the U.S. we have a lot of national parks, but Kruger is dedicated to the wildlife in that area. And trust me, it is as spectacular a thing as Glenda, my wife, and I have ever seen. We were driving along, not looking much different in the scenery for a lot, but we came around a turn, just almost the entrance to the park, and we looked over to our left, and there are about half a dozen giraffes, from small clear up to very large, a herd of impalas, all just right there. I mean, reach out and touch them, just right along the roadside. So we got out shortly to get checked into the park, and we're taking pictures of the giraffe. We're taking pictures of all these impala. The thing we found out later was the impala is equivalent to you going and seeing dairy cows for the first time in a dairy area. And you say, "Oh, look at cows," and you stop and you take all these pictures of them, and you keep taking, and after about a day of that, you go, more cows. Well, that's the way we were. More impalas. We're looking for wild animals and things that we hadn't seen. So, another bunch of impalas. Really pretty and beautiful, but they are plentiful in the park. We drove all on into the park, and we stayed at a compound, fenced and gated compound out in the middle of the park, which means you go outside the gate and the fences, wild animal country. And I mean wild. Lions, there's hippos, there's just all kinds, there's leopards, there's just lots and lots of different species, different animals. And the 2 things I remember is we came back one day from driving around and going down a lot of the dirt roads and viewing animals in our van that we had. As we got out there and around, we got back to the gate, and we have a line of cars, and the rule is they will keep everybody that's in line in up until the point it's dark and there's no more cars in line, and then they shut and lock the gates. So should you come after that time, you'll be hanging outside the compound the rest of the night, and hopefully you're there in the morning. But so it was a little bit, we always were very, very heightened as, we're going to get back in time to get back inside. And so it was funny, but by the same time, it was real at that point. We went on many of, probably the most memorable trip we had is we were out there looking, we're on a dirt road, and we were out looking at some elephants. There was about half a dozen of them. There was one that had a bad leg and was partly crippled, and then there was the dominant bull and some of the females that were there, and a couple of small little baby elephants. And the bull looked at us for quite a while, and then he started to walk our way. And then he decided he would trot our way, and then he decided he would run our way. And he would, as he was getting closer, he stopped and started pawing the dirt. And that's about the time we decided reverse would be a good idea. And we slammed it in reverse and took off backwards, back over a hill or two. And the bull elephant came down and saw us driving away. He walked over to the side of the road, and there was a tree probably about 3 or 4 inches in diameter. Out there, I don't know what type of tree it was. And he went over with his head and pushed on it and got it to start to lean over a little bit. Then he took one of his front feet and got on it and pushed and flattened it to the ground. Then he reached out with his trunk and picked it up and ripped it out from the rest of the roots out of the ground, drug it over to the road, looked at us, shook it back and forth, slammed it down and stared at us to say, "This is my house. You're only allowed to visit it when I let you." And it was something that I'll never forget. It was just a tremendous something. I just never expect to experience that again. Also, inside the compound at night, to go out and look at the stars, just unbelievable sight down there, just this vastness of this entire park. Beautiful skylight. Was able to see down in the southern hemisphere the Southern Cross, which it was my first trip down there. I'd always heard about it and was able to see it. And the other thing I will never forget is if it was really quiet, and then all you could hear was the screaming of certain animals, the hyenas and the wild dogs. And then you would hear all of a sudden the roar of the lion, which was through this nighttime with no sound, was just deafening. It was something, again, I'll never forget. But while we were there, and one of the things South Africa is known for in their animal species, it's what they call the Big Five, which most people don't get an opportunity to see them, but they are the lions, the black rhinos, elephants, the Cape buffalo, and leopards. Those are considered the top 5. And the only one we weren't able to see, because the leopards we were viewing mostly in the daytime, and they kind of get up in a tree and hang out during the day, and they come down either in the early morning or at night. Neither time would I want to be out looking for them at that time. So we weren't able to see them, but we also, of course, saw crocodiles, hippos, that a lot of the, like impalas, but they call them kudus, and the springboks and the waterhoaks. Then the other ones like the warthog, and then jackals and wild dogs, and the cheetah, which was a beautiful animal, zebras, hyenas, and it just goes on and on and on. Many, many different types of birds, but the amount of animals that were in this area was really at a height, because this for them is the off season, which means they all congregate in kind of the area we were in, because it's very, very dry, and this is where most of the water is. So they were all coming from a lot of these other areas. So we were able to see a lot of them, and that was a good time to be down there. After that, we went on back to Pretoria, which was is kind of their seat of government, but they have 3 different branches, just like we do, and the executive branch is in Pretoria, and the congressional part, senators and representatives, are in Cape Town, and then the judicial part's in another town called Bloemfontein, which is also known for diamonds. And so those 3 are the different, but Pretoria is overwhelming. It's like Washington, D.C. to us. Well, we were there, and I was to speak, not the day we got there, but the following day at the biological conference of South Africa, and there was probably 12 to 1,500 people that were going to be at this in attendance, and from all different areas, speaking a lot of different languages. It was if you've ever seen the UN on TV, you'll see where they have the microphone, and then they have people up around in different booths. Well, all those people in different booths would translate what somebody says in English to Afrikaner, to German, to whatever the dialect that you would put on your lectern there. You could punch up whichever language you needed it translated into, and they would have somebody around this room to do that. So it was really interesting. But so the day before, I'm getting ready to present, and I handed over my memory stick to the guy, and there's my programs on it. And he came back to me later that afternoon with a panicked look on his face, and he says, and in there, they never called me, although I go by Bill, have all my life, but down in South Africa, it is not Bill, it's Bull. And so he came down and he said, Bull, you don't have a program. And I said, no, you got it. And he goes, no, you don't understand. There's nothing on that memory stick. And I said, really? And so he showed me, yeah, there was nothing on there. And he goes, okay, what am I going to do? I got to make something work here. But he was just panicked, as if I couldn't go on. I couldn't do anything. But one of the things I've been gifted with is the ability to stop, think about what I want to do, organize my thoughts, and then go ahead and present. And I had somebody in the States ship me over my water presentation in an email, and we were able to download it into slides, and we converted those slides and graphs and everything into, this is primitive, I know, in today, put them into overhead slides where we put them in the order I wanted, and then I had somebody run the overhead and put the new ones in, take the old ones off as we went through there. So I was able to do that very well. And then something I knew a lot about was the other part of my presentation was tree crops of California, which if you've listened to many podcasts, that's kind of what I've specialized in. And so a lot of those, I just needed facts and figures, which I had, and I had those on a card and was able to go through both of those. One of the things that people always ask me, how can you get in front of people like that, whether it's there or Australia or Germany or Philippines, and just talk like that and not ever worry about, what you're saying or that you don't have your presentation. And one of the things I always told them is, well, the way I look at this trip is probably my one and only trip to South Africa. And of the 12 to 1,500 people in that up there, I probably will never see more than one or two of them ever again. And I said, so if I'm wrong and they think I'm an idiot, they won't be around to tell me that. And if I thought I was really good, then that's what I intended to do. So I never worried about it. I think that that particular experience lined me up really well for what I did in the future, which is speak in front of a lot of people and do it based on my information off the top of my head, understanding an order that I want to go through things and an outline to keep me on track. And I've done that all the way. I don't ever read a presentation. I'm always in, just those things trigger me to talk about those ideas, much the same way that I put these podcasts together. And the only thing I will say, it was really helpful to get those overhead slides and be able to do my water presentation, because it just wouldn't have been as good. And then I was able to leave that behind where they could take it and copy it and hand it out to other people, understanding the effects of water on soil. And it's one of the times I was really thankful for the internet. Most of the times, again, people that know me, technology is wasted on me most of the times. And so, but I was sure glad it was there for me. On this particular trip was the first of many I've taken, and I felt so blessed to be able to make these trips, because it was never my intention when I started working on soils and water and working with growers and farmers here and around the world to ever be traveling like I did. And I keep thinking back to my good friend and mentor, Neil Kinsey, and what a life he opened me up to, and the things I've done and the people I've helped and the life I've lived. This was one of the highlights, as some of the other ones you'll hear about later were. And it all, I like to say, my life changed when one day I met a guy, and I met Neil Kinsey, and in so many ways he just changed my life. And it was all over soil, and it's kind of my moniker, my handle, Soil Man, and it really is. And it's so important to what we as humans do in this world. So I just want you to, every time you get your feet wet and get muddy, that's soil. Every time you plant something and something grows, that's soil. So it does so many things for us, good and bad, and but it is something that's so important to our existence and life on this planet. So until next time, this is Bill Brush. Stay curious.
Thanks for another absolutely fantastic episode of Agriculture in a Nutshell, Bill. I'm sure that everyone very much enjoyed your story about your trip to South Africa and all the adventures and flights and oddities that you had seen whilst you were there. Remember to leave a like, comment, and subscribe, and always stay curious.